Hello, everyone, and welcome to an emergency episode of Slash Film Daily. Some big Star Wars news has hit, so we have all climbed into the bunker to chat about it. And by we all, I mean this is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And entertainment reporter for IO9 and former Slash Film writer Germain Lussier. How's it going, Germain?
Very good, Pete.
Okay, so what is the news? Ben, what have we learned?
Yes, James Mangold, the writer and director of Logan, is going to be working on a Boba Fett movie, and that's kind of all we know. The Hollywood Reporter revealed this story, and it's very bare bones at this point. We don't know any more about. Okay, so there were some rumors that Simon Kinberg was working on a Boba Fett movie years ago, and we don't know if this is that same project or if this is a competing project or if they're developing two on a parallel track to see which one they end up going with. Yeah. But that's the story right now.
Well, I will put those rumors to rest. There was a Boba Fett movie. That was the movie that Josh Trank was working on with Simon Kinberg. Kinberg was writing and producing it. Josh Trank was going to direct it, and that is history. Trank kind of self-destructed, and that movie came off the chart, and we got the Star Wars standalone movies that we have, the Rogue One and what's coming out now with Han Solo or Solo Star Wars story. Germain, you are a huge Star Wars fan, and I know we've talked a lot about this in the past because there had been rumors of this Boba Fett movie. What are your thoughts now that we know James Mangold is working on it?
Well, a couple. I mean, first thing, I want to know if they're going to show us this concept. They had a concept trailer back in 2015 when Josh Trank was going to be at Star Wars Celebration to announce this, and then days before they pulled him, and it was just Rogue One. We got the announcement of that day. News that
Trank was out sick, quote unquote.
Right, he was out sick was the official thing, and then he got pulled off the project. But that was news, by the way, Rogue One, what it was about that we broke on slashfilm.com. And so I'm curious now. Are we going to see that concept trailer at some point? That would be cool. And you got to think, and the THR article talks about it a little bit, like Kinberg and Mangold are pretty well versed. Kinberg produces the X-Men movies. Mangold has directed 2 X-Men movies. So you got to think there's some kind of a kinship there, not to be punny about it. And then, of course, so that's the behind the scenes stuff. And the other thing would be then, so is this a young Boba Fett movie, which, or a medium, Boba Fett movie, as we've already seen young Boba Fett? Or does Boba Fett get out of the Sarlacc pit, and is this, a post Return of the Jedi thing?
Well, some of the books have indicated that he, or may have suggested that he survived the Sarlacc pit.
Right. One of my favorite quotes about Star Wars canon came from Pablo Hidalgo, where he said, the way to explain it is Boba Fett is both alive and dead in that Sarlacc pit until a story takes him out. And so, because it's not really been defined, he falls in there and you assume he died, in 1983. But if somebody wrote a story to bring him out or kill him, it's never been 100% said, at least in the canon now.
It's the Schrodinger's cat of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been, and like you said, there's definitely been some rumors and stuff of different armors that have been found in books and stuff, Mandalorian things, and we've seen a lot of Mandalorian lore in Rebels. So there's definitely stuff to mine here. But I mean, honestly, as cool as Boba Fett is, I keep seeing this quote going around again in the last couple of days. They said Boba Fett's not a character; he's a suit of armor, and I kind of agree with that. We know that he was a clone, and his dad was Jango Fett, and he wanted to kill, Mace Windu or whatever, or Han Solo. But man, I don't know, I'm just not as excited about his story as I am about seeing that suit on screen. That to me is cooler. Yeah.
Well, maybe that could be a thing in this movie. I after seeing Solo, I was talking to one of the press members, and they had this insane theory that Han Solo was going to get killed at the end of the movie, and then someone was going to take up his reign, which is just like an insane. I don't know. I don't. Whatever. But maybe they could do that with this Boba Fett movie. Maybe Boba Fett is not the Boba Fett we saw in the prequels. Maybe it is a mantle, kind of like the Batman costume in Nolan's Dark Knight. I do know that when Trank and Kinberg were working on this, it was a sci-fi space spaghetti western. Which certainly sounds like that would be something up Mangold's wait, he did 310 to Yuma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess let's talk about Mangold for a second, really quick. Ben, is he someone that you would expect to want to do a Star Wars movie, and what can we expect from a Mangold Star Wars movie?
So, I mean, I got to put this out here. This is yet another white guy who's writing and directing a Star Wars movie, and I just feel like we have to acknowledge that because we have to keep acknowledging it until Lucasfilm does something about it. It's something that Kathleen Kennedy has talked about, like, oh yeah, we want to bring women into this world. She keeps saying it, and she's not actually doing it. So,
but
Ben,
yeah. JJ got a second unit female director.
All right, Peter, come on now. So I just wanted to throw that out there up top so people don't think that we're completely brushing over that. But trying to concentrate, putting that aside and concentrating on Mangold as a filmmaker, he's one of those guys who started his career, and he struck me as a person who was almost sort of like a Ron Howard, honestly, like a journeyman sort of director, a guy who knew what he was doing and could just come in and get things done. And he didn't necessarily have a vibrant style or a flashiness to his filmmaking. But in recent years, I feel like with movies like 310 to Yuma and with Logan especially, he's proven himself to be somebody who again, even those movies aren't necessarily what I would call flashy, but there is a passion and a beating heart and an intelligence to those movies that I feel like eludes a lot of his contemporaries. So, I mean, if you are going to pick a white guy to make this movie, I think he's a pretty decent choice, especially if they do go in that spaghetti western kind of direction. Because even something like Copland, one of his earlier films, has a few of those tropes wrapped up in like a more modern setting. So the idea that he could explore famous cinematic tropes wrapped up in a sci-fi setting in the Star Wars universe is vaguely intriguing. But yeah, sort of like Germain, I'm not excited about Boba Fett the character. I would love to see Lucasfilm just make another movie about a different bounty hunter, but I guess that's a separate topic. But getting back to Mangold, what do you guys think about him as a potential Star Wars filmmaker?
Germain.
I mean, I'll tell you, I agree with a lot of Ben said. I think as a filmmaker, he's become a person I trust. He's not somebody who's going to rush something into production just to do it. He, like a movie like Logan is a movie that was risky, but he knew he could do right, and the results showed that. I think even the Wolverine was, a pretty big risk at the time and ended up turning out pretty well. So he's got that great mix of, independent aesthetic with blockbuster kind of appeal. Also, you won't. This is I'm about to tweet this, but I'll say it here first, which my tweet will go up for you. Anybody hears this, but he will be the second person from my home area to make a Star Wars movie because Tony Gilroy grew up like a town away from James Mangold, and they knew each other growing up.
Interesting.
In the suburbs of New York City, in Orange County, New York. So, because I used to work up there, and I used to talk to James Mangold, like when he was making, I think it was 310 to Yuma, and I talked to Gilroy, who of course did Rogue One after what Gareth Edwards got out when he did like Michael Clayton. So, really film literate, smart guy, and we'll see. But yeah, Ben is right. It's really getting comical now that it's just the same white guys over and over again. And yeah, they're all talented. Favreau and and Ryan and JJ, Ron Howard,
and Benioff and Weiss.
Yeah, but then what about and really Boba Fett? Oh man, I don't know.
And there's also that Obi-Wan movie supposedly in the works. We're getting all these movies telling the story of characters that I don't think we want or need this to hear the stories of, which is my biggest, I think, criticism of, Solo, a Star Wars story. I know Germain and I are both on the positive side of things, but even though we're on the positive side of things, I think it's not a movie we needed. Do you know what I mean? And but not to get into spoilers with that movie that hits theaters, tonight?
Yeah, probably in 30 minutes on the East Coast. Yeah.
But I will talk vaguely as possibly can. The movie, I think, sets up future Star Wars things, and I'm kind of wondering. A lot of people are taking that as like setting up a Solo sequel in some way. You guys have both seen this movie, and I want to talk as vague as possible because we don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But do you think there's the possibility that could be setting up something for this movie or the Obi-Wan movie, or do you know what I mean? Like, it could Star Wars be learning something from Marvel and kind of doing that kind of expanded, connected universe kind of thing?
Germain, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, they kind of already are, right? It's all one universe. But I know what you're saying. So, like, basically, potentially,
one sets
Han
up
Solo,
another.
Boba Fett could be a sequel to Han Solo, and Obi-Wan could be a sequel to Boba Fett and Han Solo. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
And sure, why not? Like, they kind of all are anyway. It's just a matter of would the stories interconnect at all. And we know that Han Solo knows who Boba Fett is. Like, that is canon. We don't know what exactly their interactions were. But, if this did take place before A New Hope, yeah, that could absolutely do it. Alden Ehrenreich has a 3-contract deal, and that doesn't mean it has to be in a Solo movie, right? I mean, like Chris Hemsworth or whatever had like 8 contract deals. That wasn't for 8 Thor movies. It was to appear as Thor in 8 movies. So I think it's an interesting possibility for sure.
The other thing I'm wondering is, Boba Fett is a bad guy, in all, in every story that he's been in. I know Lucasfilm was doing that, 1313 video game project, which was supposedly going to have kind of like Boba Fett and give him a kind of arc to him. Like, how do you tell the story of a bad guy in a, Disney universe? Ben, do you have any thoughts?
That's an interesting question. The thing about it is whatever they do is going to be way cooler than whatever we see Boba Fett doing in the original trilogy by definition, because he barely exists in the original trilogy. So when you watch all of these movies, when all is said and done, when the dust is settled on the Star Wars universe and you try to watch all these stories in order, assuming this happens before the original trilogy, and even if it happens after, it's going to, if it ties in with any other character in the Star Wars universe, it's just going to make Boba Fett's original appearance even more, like, stand out even more, like that, how lame of a character he truly was in the original trilogy. So I don't know how far they can sort of push the envelope in a villain direction. I don't know if they're going to even want to do that. Maybe they would do something where they would try to recontextualize the character as like a misunderstood hero or something, or somebody who's been driven to a life of crime to try to make us give a shit about this guy. But I don't know. What do you think, Germain?
I mean, look at like Maleficent. They've done it before. Like, she's the bad guy in the movie, but she's also, she has a good heart or whatever. I think a bounty hunter is as a character is somebody who's just out for themselves, right? People can relate to that, relate to somebody who's just out for number one. And he's a bad guy, but only because we see him take out, capture our hero, right? I mean, he's and fight Obi-Wan Kenobi as a little boy, in episode 2. He's, so that doesn't mean he can't be hired by Princess Leia for a mission, and then he becomes a good guy. It's just about who he's working for because he has no allegiances as a bounty hunter. So I think there's definitely easy ways you could spin it to make it fit in.
Or like Boba Fett is played by Liam Neeson and like his family is kidnapped, let's say, and then like he just has to do all this stuff to get his family back, right? Like it's just, he's being forced to do it. So he's really a good guy.
His dad was murdered by Mace Windu, Ben. I don't know what to tell you. Interesting. Daniel Logan, the kid who played Boba Fett in episode 2, was at the Solo premiere, which I thought was weird. But then there were other people at the Solo premiere that ended up being not so weird. and so who knows? Maybe this has been in the works, and maybe who knows? Maybe it's actually going to be Daniel Logan in the role. That'd be cool.
That would be weird. Germain, I talk a lot on this podcast about Cobra Kai. I know you're a big fan of Cobra Kai. I love how that series recontextualized a bad guy, an iconic bad guy from, the 80s, and made him kind of into an anti-hero of some sort. I'd be interested in seeing Disney tackle that with Boba Fett. Maybe, let me propose this idea to you guys. I want to hear what your thoughts are. What if half this movie is him climbing out of the Sarlacc pit, and half of it is, him as a younger man, and it's cutting back and forth, Lost style, with things reflecting each other, and it's kind of a redemption story of sorts.
So it's 127 hours.
Well, it's not in a tooth.
Yeah, it's not about him being stuck in the Sarlacc pit. It's like, I don't know.
No, I know. I'm cool. Like, yeah, why not? Yeah, why not have the best of both worlds? It's not like you have to tell a linear story. So if you think about it, Solo is one of the first Star Wars movies that really tell a straight linear story where we stay with the main characters the entire time. Everyone else sort of splits up in most of the movies, or meets each other later in the movie. So, yeah, why not tell it? Yeah, I think that idea is cool. He's out there, he's trying to get out. In the movie's him flashing back to how he got to this place in his life. It's also and then and then he gets out at the end of the movie, and now you have Boba Fett 2 ready to go.
Man, I would just love it if Boba Fett died in the first 5 minutes of this movie, and then it picked up with a different bounty hunter altogether. They sell the whole movie based on Boba Fett, and then they just wipe him out immediately. That would be truly subversive. One of the most subversive things that a safe corporation like Disney could do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. Do you guys have any last thoughts on the Boba Fett movie? I know we've gone, almost 20 minutes now on basically a one-line news story, but we're Star Wars fans, so
I have one thing. I'm curious, when is this going to happen? We still don't know what the 2020 movie is, right? This seems to be now a movie with a writer and a director attached, and potentially an early version of a script. But James Mangold is supposed to be making this Ford and Ferrari movie that is supposed to shoot soon. So is he going to bang that out and then work on this for 2020, or can he even do that with the amount of things he'd have to do? I guess potentially it's only mid 2018. That would be my question. That's my only last thought on it.
I mean, is there the possibility that Disney could take a year off from Star Wars?
No,
I don't think so.
I mean, we did hear about that, Stephen.
A year and a half off now.
What?
They're taking a year and a half off now.
Yeah. We did hear about that Stephen Daldry Obi-Wan Kenobi movie quite a while back. I would feel like that must be further along, right?
Well, if you look at the THR article, says that he's still in negotiations and there's no writer.
Huh.
So there's not. So I know you guys turn that into another story, guys. But yeah. So who knows if that's going to happen before this?
I mean, maybe they could just rush a Lando movie into production. You saw how Donald Glover was able to crank out a fake script for what was that?
For his Deadpool series.
Deadpool series in an hour. I'm sure him and Hero, the guy that directs his Atlanta show, they could just make it happen.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's always Rian Johnson's spinoff, that could fill the 2020 slot, one of those movies, or even Benioff and Weiss's thing. We don't know what that's going to be yet, too. So they announced both of those previously, so maybe they're far enough along to get that in theaters for 2020. I don't know.
We'll have to see. This is the continuing saga that will never end. Germain, thanks for joining us. Where can people find more of your work online?
You can read me on ion9.com, and I'm on Twitter and everything else at Germain Lussier.
Ben, where can people find you?
You can find me at /film and on Twitter at Ben Pears.
You can find me at /film on Twitter. You can find this podcast published every weekday on iTunes, all the popular podcast apps. Please follow us. Give us a review on iTunes. We will see you later.